Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bowtie Security Guy After Dark. With me today is my buddy Andy Olpin. Andy, I wanted to have you kind of on the podcast to talk about your career and like what you do now, and also kind of how you transitioned into kind of that sales engineer role, which I think is a path that a lot of people don't really even know what the hell it is. So,
Yeah.
um, but let's talk about kind of your early career, how you got into technology, how you got into cyber, and just tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, let's see. I have lots of stories about being in tech. I started off my famous story about moving to Florida is I in fourth grade they made us all write an autobiography, and at the end of this autobiography, I had to put a page on what you were going to be when you grew up. So fourth grade, I write on this piece of paper, I'm going to fix computers at Walt Disney World. So here I am. And in my mid 20s, I got an opportunity to do an internship and came out to Disney. But before that, I got started in technology in a call center for Packard Bell Electronics. So anybody who's old enough to remember those old Packard Bell crappy computers, you can imagine the kind of fun you have talking to people who were running those things.
Look, I loved my tech support days, man. Like I look back at them fondly. I worked for Dell
Oh yeah,
and Palm Pilot, right? I still remember when Palm Pilot first came out with
me
their
too.
Tungsten W, where it had it you were able to go on the internet and use it as a phone, and it was like mind-blowing. Like in one of my favorite calls was with like my buddy got a call from somebody when we first got the Tungsten W, and we're like, okay, hey, I can't get on the internet, I can't do this. And we're like, all right, go ahead and reset the device, and then the call drops because people weren't even used to a phone being able to go on the internet, so they would just hang up on you and reset their phone. Uh,
I had every one of those stereotypical internet calls that you joke about. The person who opened the CD-ROM drive and put their drink in it.
yeah, no, that's legit. I had a
Oh,
call like that too. I had a guy. I was doing escalations at the time at Dell that he was so pissed off that his keyboard didn't have an any key. It was this older gentleman, and and he got
yep.
escalated like through multiple people because they're like, just hit any key. He's like, there isn't one. So he finally gets to me, and I was prepped that like he'd gone through two other stages before he got to me. And they're like, yeah, this guy is really angry because he doesn't have an any key. I was like, is it a joke? They're like, no, I think he's serious. So he gets to me on the call and he goes, the damn thing doesn't have an any key. And I was like, wait, what model Dell do you have? And he's like, I have this model Dell. I said, the any key's under the space bar. And he's like, are you kidding me? Why didn't they freaking tell me this? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm so sorry. Those guys were idiots. And he's like, you're damn right they were. I paid, but those things actually happen. Like that was our lives. So you got
Well,
into, so you went early on. You basically made this proclamation at 4 years
oh
in
yeah.
fourth
Uh-huh.
grade,
Yep.
and
And
then you got a job at Packard Bell. And then how did that turn into the internship at Disney? Kind of how did
oh,
you make that pivot?
oh man, it was an interesting thing, right? We'd have to get in all kinds of my personal history for the whole story, but I was in college at the time. I was trying to finish my degree at the University of Utah, living in Salt Lake City, and I had a writing course as part of the degree program, and you have to write a cover letter, right? It was just like, hey, you have to do this thing. And then I don't remember how I saw it. I saw this thing was like a paid professional internship at Disney. And I was like, well, I got this letter and I'm in college. Let's just send it on, see what happens. Like, who the hell knows? And sure enough, they called me and they offered me the spot. So it was a 4 month program, and it paid, and it was PC LAN support, right? So working in the Team Disney building, uh, fixing computers, right? The same thing, just in person rather than over the phone. And it turns out, working at Packard Bell for almost 5 years, my troubleshooting skills were on point. So, they fly me out here. I'm out here for 4 months. And like, I've got situations where the senior guy on the team is like, man, I'm having this trouble with this computer. I can't figure it out. And I walk up and I go, oh, the setting's right here. It also applies to that. Or okay, we're done now. Let's go to lunch. So
It's funny how you get to that point too, I think, where you've done it so many times that you just kind of walk through it. I still remember somebody calling me and I'm like on the road and I'm like, all right, click here, third option, fourth window. Yep, click there, and they're like, can you see my screen? And I'm like, in my
yeah,
head, yes, yes, I
yeah,
can.
yeah,
I
exactly.
can I can see
I
what you're doing.
this was before the days of remote control and remote access.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
like
know,
we got
this.
so used to bleeding blind people
Oh
basically
yeah,
is what our job
yeah,
was.
1,000%. And at one point when I was at Packard Bell, I did quality control, right? So I started off doing tech support, then I got to the tech escalation, and eventually I was a quality control guy. So my job was to listen to the calls and give people advice. And I remember, all the basic stuff you hear other people doing, like somebody would call up and say my monitor's not working. And they would run through all this troubleshooting, and I'm sitting here going, the computer's not turning on. The computer's not turning on. It's not a monitor problem. The computer's not
Right.
turning on.
I had a call that was just kind of hilarious where the guy was really angry. It's a brand new computer, and we're like 20 minutes into it, and I'm checking all the connections. All the connections are good. And then he goes, well, and I finally said, like, this may sound foolish, but is the power on? And he's like, I'm on the phone, aren't I, idiot? And I was like, yeah, corded phones don't require power.
They're
Like,
powered by the wire.
they're powered by the wire. And he goes, click. And I was like, yeah, who's the idiot now? You didn't even have power in your building. But
Uh,
I find that interesting because that's one thing that I talked to another guest. Obviously, we know Ron
mhm.
because we played D&D with him. But
Yes, we do.
um, like I think that's something that's going away. Like that core troubleshooting skill
Yep.
is like non-existent. I've seen it countless times when people are interviewing where I'm like, hey, you're not able to ping this machine. What do you do first? And they're like, oh well, I would run this diagnostic and that diagnostic, and I would do this. And I'm like, well, okay, is it on?
Yeah.
Like, the basic stuff. So you got into that. You did Packer Bell for a bit. You
Yep.
wrote a letter to Disney,
I did.
which is how fantastically old we are.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you wrote a letter. You ended up scoring this internship, and
Yep.
then you were doing PC Land. How did you pivot it into like a full-time gig? Did they just
Well,
offer it at the end of your
no.
internship?
So, like so many things, I didn't have my college degree at the time. So I went to talk to HR, and HR was like, "Why would we offer it to you? You don't have a degree. I can give this job to anybody who has a degree." So fortunately, the team at the time believed in me, right? I was really good at my job, and they were like, "Dude, we'd love to have you on the team." So I ended up kind of making ends meet for a little while. I moved to Florida full time. Told my wife I wanted a divorce, but that's a whole other story. Um, but so I moved to Florida full time, and kind of made ends meet with one of those jobs where you go from house to house, replacing computer parts. I got by, and eventually got hired on as a contractor doing PC LAN, and then eventually converted to a cast member. And it was one of those like, the end of my internship, they would not hire me as an associate analyst. And then less than a year later, I get picked up as a full-time cast member as a full analyst, right? So it ended up working out that they didn't hire me right away, but it was definitely, it was a little strange.
Well, that's a really good thing for people to remember is like when we always hear like a door closes, another one opens, etc. But I
Yep.
think in IT specifically, it's like whenever you feel like you've not succeeded in your goal, that's when your goal comes back and kind of punches you and goes, "Hey, no, you just needed to wait a little longer."
Yeah, yeah,
You needed to take a step back and kind of figure things out and kind of do things a little differently. Um, and then that's when things truly start to kind of pan out, where you end up getting that opportunity to kind of come on full time, where they're like, "We're not going to hire you. You don't have a degree." It's
yep,
amazing how important that was, 20 years ago. Now it's like we would love you to have a master's, but like if you got 5 years of experience, we're good. We're good.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and you know, I took it to heart because Disney at the time had a pretty good degree reimbursement program. So I think I don't remember what the minimum requirements were before they started paying, but like the day after I hit the minimum length, I got and went and finished my bachelor's degree, and then I turned around and eventually had Disney pay for my MBA. Like, have I used those degrees? Not really, but it was good for me to have that under my belt, so I wouldn't ever get turned down by HR again just for not having the piece of paper.
yeah, I will say during the time that we were coming up, that was way more important than it is now.
Yep.
It is, I think, still important to some of the older generations. I'm an older generation myself,
Hmm.
so I can say that. But like, I see it being more important to those. Like, if you talk to a 20-year-old startup, like, who's doing a start, they don't care.
No.
I mean, even if you look at the way Walt Disney did things, he didn't care, right? One of my favorite stories is I got an opportunity to kind of sit down and like in a room with like maybe 50 people and Bob Gurr, right? This legend
Oh yeah.
at
Uh-huh.
Disney.
Uh-huh.
Bob was basically pulled off the street. Like Disney, Walt was like, I like the way you think. Come build some stuff, right? And then as soon as Walt died, a new regime came into Imagineering and said, you know what, Bob, you don't have a degree. And unless you have an engineering degree, you can't stay here. And this is a dude who built the monorail, a guy who designed the ride system that is still used today for all of the rides. And they're like, no, man, you can't be an engineer. So he said, you know what? Fine, forget you. I quit. And he went and he built his own company. He decided to his first big gig was with Universal building Kong for Kongfortation, right?
Yep.
So like it's like he just refused to go to school to get a degree for engineering when he's like, are you kidding me? I have like 8 patents under my name for engineering. Um,
Well, and
but
and so
they
much
put such
practical
a
experience building rides and doing the
right,
exact work you'd have to train somebody else to do, right?
right.
Like I get you don't want me here because you want to be able to change everything and do it your way, but come on, man.
It was one of those things where he said that to him, it was like just a personal offense where he refused to kind of play ball. And then he ended up coming back to Disney and working on stuff when less foolish people were in charge. But I mean, it comes to that thing where you don't really know what's going to be beneficial and what's not. So do what's good for you. Like you said, hey, I haven't really used it, but I didn't want that to ever be a roadblock in the future.
Yeah, and doing what's best for you is always important. Like I never understood throughout my career, you'll see somebody will leave the company, and it happened when I left Disney, right? You'll see somebody leave the company and there'll be all this personal animosity, like you're betraying the company. And like, as much as I loved working for Disney, Disney never really had my back. They would have cut me loose in a fraction of a second if that's what was best for them. So
I
why,
mean, as somebody who's been laid off by Disney
yeah,
after 19
yeah,
years,
you would know.
I I would know that personally.
Yeah.
I think something like job security in companies is kind of no longer something you should ever depend on. Like
Yeah.
just you shouldn't think that your company is going to always have your back. You shouldn't feel that way because they are a company, they are a business. Sometimes those decisions happen so high that that person who would have fought for you didn't even get an opportunity.
Oh yeah, no,
You-
I heard all those stories when you were going through it and all the stuff at Disney. And
Yeah.
honestly, it's one of the reasons I left. I'd worked for Disney for a lot of years and a lot of it was amazing, right? Like just being able to say you worked there and the
Oh my
ridiculously
God.
silly stuff like being able to go ride rides in the middle of the night to
Yeah.
test things or
I got to
eat
sit at the piano on the Haunted Mansion, right? In the
yeah,
ballroom. Like
yeah.
I'm a huge, Disney fan, Haunted Mansion fan. But it was weird for me when I got laid off because that animosity was hard, right? I was like,
Oh
I
yeah.
felt like I lost a loved one.
Yeah.
Because it's half my life. So it was a weird thing to go through. But I agree wholeheartedly with you. Is like it's a job still. Like, even though we got to do amazing stuff and work on I got to help build Star Wars Land, secure Star
Yeah.
Wars Land. Like, how cool was that? Um, we both kind of got to live that dream, but at a certain point, your dream does just become a job.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's and it the magic doesn't stay forever. It's just not it's not
well,
possible.
and you know, I eventually transitioned through a bunch of stuff to enterprise IT and enterprise architecture. And oh my God, the meetings, like, oh my God, you know, you had to have meetings on top of meetings to prepare for meetings. You had to interact with every different business unit to get buy-off from every different type of decision you may want to make. And I eventually just got tired of any kind of you know, process where I just had to have so much bureaucracy, the red tape, and watching them continue to employ complete idiots that would never lose their job, and it just got depressing, right? And also the other thing is I love Disney. I came here to work for Disney, and so many of the people I work with could not care less. They were just like, whatever, I never go to the park. Yeah, they give me these cool things for Christmas. I never use that. And it was
Oh,
like,
well,
why are
I
you
was.
here?
Why are you here? I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. There's so many people who work at Disney who are not Disney fans. It's almost comical.
Yeah.
Because I'm like I was rah-rah so hard with Disney that like I built like with another guy. We built this kind of backstage tour thing, and he built it out, and then I was like one of the admins of it, and we just took people on backstage tours all the time, like to just
Mhm.
nerd out about
Yeah.
Disney. But there were so many people who were there, like you said, they were just like, ah, I never go to the park. I don't really care. It was like, what are you doing? Like, go just get another job.
Well,
But
and
they lack the skills to interview to find
yeah.
another job.
Well, and Disney was always kind of famous for a little bit underpaying because you worked for Disney. So to some
Yeah,
extent, if you were going to stay at Disney, you needed to believe in that mission, right? And to
yeah.
have so many people in IT who just didn't,
It was
it
wild to me.
it's
Yeah,
sad. You know, I don't know. I just didn't, it did. Like you said, the magic kind of got lost for me. I also didn't enjoy, you know, this is just me, like all the cast benefits of going to the park was some of my favorite things. And they just kept taking that away. Oh, we're going to
yeah.
add blackout dates. Every time you show up in a shirt with a collar, some undercover security guy is going to be monitoring you, right, to make sure you're not selling your packs. And it was like,
There
you
were
know,
so
really?
many people who sold passes.
I'm sure, but at the same time, it's like, you know, it doesn't make me feel like a valued employee you care about, you know?
Right, when you're monitoring me.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. So it just got to the point I was like, yeah, see you later.
Well,
You
so at one point though, you ended up kind of getting into the mobile security and architecture
did?
side. Like, how
Yep.
did that transition? I think, that's an interesting story. Like, how did you fall into, hey, this guy does PC LAN support. Oh, let's have him build and architect a solution for mobile security.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. So I my career at Disney, I had a bunch of times where I barely missed the axe, right? So I was a contractor. I got hired full time as a cast member. Like
Yeah.
3 months
People don't
later,
realize how often people get laid off at Disney. We
yeah.
called it Blue Folder Day, right?
Oh yeah.
Remember? Because
Mhm.
you would get a blue folder and you would be walked out. I survived in my 20 years there 9 layoffs and 9 rounds of layoffs, and on the 10th I finally got popped, right? So
Oh,
I made it through 10 of them, but people don't realize it's like every year there
yeah,
was
it
a
happens a
round of
lot.
reorg
Yep.
and layoff.
And
Yeah,
my favorite. So well, let me tell you my story. I realize we're kind of wandering all over the place, but that's cool. So I was on PC Land, and I have kind of a built-in desire where I want to make things better if I can, right? And we were at the time, again, to talk about how old we were in the process of moving from our NT domain into Active Directory. So it was the brand new thing with Windows 2000, right? And as is this thing that Microsoft has, so you can distribute configurations down to your managed computers, right? Something you couldn't really do with NT4 domains. So I started researching that. I'm like, hey, what is this? This is pretty cool. And I started talking to all the managers about group policy. And they said, hey, instead of just doing PC LAN, we want you to move into this role where you're going to be doing kind of security work for end user compute, which what that really meant was I was responsible for group policy configuration so that the all the security setting on all the PCs were consistent. And then I got tasked into compliance work. So my job was like, I was the PCI and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance guy for all the end user compute stuff, which meant Active Directory and everything else. So it kind of just happened. They were like, we're going to put you in this job, and here it is. Like, oh, okay.
And you continued to, when you left Disney, you went over to Mobile Iron,
I
right,
did.
for a bit.
Yep.
So what was that job like, and what is the job of what you did at that time? So I'd love people to kind of hear what is this like a sales engineer? Like
Yeah.
what is that job, and how does somebody kind of go into it? I feel like it's a very unique skill set,
It
because
is.
it requires a massive technical knowledge, but also the ability to talk to humans without insulting them. Like
Well,
when I say insulting them, I mean not being rude, but like over talking them in tech language. You've got to be able to kind of, I don't want to say dumb things down because that's rude, but I mean, you've really got to lower things down to anyone's level so anyone can kind of grok what you're saying. How
it's
did that transition happen?
it happened. It was kind of natural for me. So let me describe the role. So if you've ever, the software people all know, what the job is. But if you're not in tech, or if you're just getting into tech, everybody knows what sales guys do, right? They're going to show up at your desk, they're going to buy you a steak dinner, and they're going to try to convince you to buy their software. The problem is that if a sales guy convinces you to take a meeting to hear about his software, he doesn't typically know anything about his software, right? He knows like way up here, like the 50,000 foot view. He can tell you maybe a couple of business problems it solves, but he doesn't know the technical detail. So almost always what happens is the sales guys who sell software or tech hardware are paired with a sales engineer. So a sales engineer's job is to come and teach you about what the software does. So yes, I have to be really technical. I got to know how everything works. I got to know what it does, how it does it, what's possible, what isn't possible, and the whole nine yards. But as you say, I've got to be able to explain it because my job is to show up and talk about it. I'm not just sitting in the basement making it work. I have to come in and talk to you about it. I have to tell you how it works. I have to present it in a good light, and that does not mean lying about it, which is one of the fun things about being a sales engineer. You can't lie about it. You just want to present it in a good light, right? But you never ever want to lie about it. And in sales, sometimes you get pressure to do that, but that's not the job, right? Your job is to be the trusted advisor so that the customers, when they're looking at this software, they can go, "Hey, Andy, how does this work? I have this problem. Can you guys solve that? Oh, no, we can't solve this problem, but here's some suggestions I can do for how we could get closer." Right? So you become kind of a trusted advisor where everybody knows the sales guy. Well, you can't trust him, right? So it's
So you're almost like like you said, almost that trusted advisor, but you're also that reality check sometimes, I think,
yeah,
for like
sales guy.
that's great that the sales guy told you that. It's not what I get what he was saying. Let me explain what it can do.
Yeah.
Um and to its limits. What are your thoughts kind of on mobile security? Obviously, it's your current business, but I mean, where do you see it going? What are some of the things that people need to be worried about? What are some things that businesses should be concerned about?
Well, it's interesting, right? So, security on a regular PC started differently, right? All the security threats and all the viruses and everything started by people seeing what they could do, and they weren't really after money, and they weren't that organized. So you had these issues where if you weren't protected by antivirus, you'd get something that would wipe out half the devices in your fleet, and it would be real bad. Well, mobile started off the other way, right? So there aren't really people who are hacking for fun. There are a few, but most of the people who are really after really, really nasty stuff on mobile are nation states, right? You hear things like Pegasus and some of these other, and some of those things are incredibly nasty, but they also hit.
Pegasus could infect someone by sending them a text message.
Correct.
That
And
was
that
that
doesn't
was amazing
and that
virus.
doesn't mean you clicked a text message.
No,
It's
no, you got it.
sending you a text message.
Yeah, it was an amazing exploit.
Yeah.
The way that it was implemented, the way it was utilized by nation state. Anyone who's listening, take a moment to research Pegasus because it was beautiful. I
Well,
mean,
and what they've done with Pegasus is NSO Group still has it, and they just keep revving it. You know, they look for new flaws and new vulnerabilities and new ways to distribute it because the goal for these kind of nation state, you know, 0.1 percenters is to get something on your phone that can run codex, code exec, break out of the sandbox, and jailbreak your phone. Because when they do that, I can install an implant that runs, it gets access to everything. I know your location. I can turn on the microphone. I get access to all your text messages and emails. I probably have access to your time-based one-time passwords and your password vault, right? I have the keys to the kingdom, and I know everything about you and what you're doing. So I don't use these exploits widely, right? Unlike PCs, I'm not going to try to jailbreak every phone in the company, right? I'm going to target. Let me get the CEO. Let me get the CFO. Let me get this guy and that guy and the other. So it's scary, but it's that particular threat's real focused. What we're seeing more largely is we're seeing attackers have figured out that, you know, if I want to steal your credentials, man, the best way to do that's via text message, right? Because if I send you an email, well, the organization's got 1,000 email protections on that. Whereas if I send you a text message, the organization typically has none, and the user clicks on it so much faster. They're so much more likely to be like, sign into Office. Okay. You know, tap the message, pass username, password, one-time PIN, type it in,
it
right? And
it's amazing how many times the users will enable an attacker to get into an environment.
yep.
Social engineering is still the number one threat to companies. It is still the number one threat vector. It is still the phishing and smishing and social engineering. It's always going to be there. But with text messaging, people don't understand. You become a creature of habit, right? And if these attackers send you a message that says, "Hey, we see you're trying to log into Office and you just came into Office and came into work that day," you that
Look at
they've now built social trust without even having to try because, oh yeah, I just logged in. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I just logged in. Clearly, this is legit. So what
and
happens when they click? Like what does it do? Like
so
give me an example of something you see commonly.
it depends, but most commonly the ones after enterprises are after credentials, right? Because what the other thing that attackers have figured out is they know where the data lives now. 20 years ago, they had to figure that out. They had to go and search your network and find your file shares and go, you know, do some hunting around. Now all your data lives in Office 365 or Google, right? They know it. So if I get your credentials, and I don't care who you are in your organization, it can be the littlest, most regular dude in your org, I get your credentials. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go log into Okta, whatever you use for multi-factor auth, and I'm going to see all the cloud apps you have access to, and I'm going to start opening them, right? And I can do things like I'm going to open Slack and I'm going to search for passwords.xls. You don't have to be an admin. All you have to do is somebody in your organization took a password file, shared it out on Slack without realizing how Slack permissions works, and now the attacker has it, right? Same thing on Google Drive, same thing on OneDrive, right? It's really easy to use these tools to just start searching for stuff, and it gets you access to data in minutes, right? So within minutes, already got some juicy stuff. If I want to, I can then turn around and do more phishing attacks from the guy whose credentials I stole. Because wow, it looks even more legit when it comes from a real email address, right? So it's just a different attack profile, right? I'm not living off of malware and searching your network, right? I'm just basically traveling the highways your users are, which makes me harder to catch.
So a lot of people realize think that a certain phone company like Android is better than iPhone or iPhone is better than Android. What are your kind of thoughts from a security perspective? I know I have my own, and ironically, I use an Android, but I personally would say that the Apple architecture and the Apple system is more locked down because of how it's designed and how they control not only applications that are installed but how root access is given at a mobile level. Because I did mobile security for a long time at
Mhm.
Disney. I
Yep.
actually came in and took over your job when you left it.
Yeah.
So like when what are which one do you think kind of has that better security, or what have you seen in your
It's
experience?
it's hard to say. I think Apple still has the lock on some of the permissioning.
Hmm.
But one of the challenges you have with Apple is so convinced that their architecture is secure, they don't necessarily give us the tools we'd like, right? So while I can say with Android, it's a little easier to sideload an app, it's a little easier for me to do bad things, especially with their accessibility permission, which is super fun when you see a piece of malware get a hold of that permission. But at the same time, as a company who does mobile threat defense, right, whose job it is to look for these threats on mobile, I have a lot more levers with Android, where Android will give me access to the file system and access to look at the apps, where Apple will be like, no, we're so secure. You don't need to know what apps are installed. You're not allowed to have that. So we end up having to work through the MDM channel, which gives us answers, but there's a lot of delays built in there,
Yep.
right? So you have this situation where I think for the average user, Apple is probably more secure. But when you're talking about your executives and being able to say, I want guarantees that this device hasn't been
Yep.
tampered with, Android probably has more
Yeah, because it
out
gives you
there.
more visibility into the system,
Yeah.
and that's the best part about open source, right?
Yeah.
Is that they allow you to look under the hood, where Apple is very much like, there's nothing here, don't look. Uh,
Well, and even more than that, like we've seen all kinds of times where Apple has gone in and said, we'll put out a press release and talk about mobile security, and we'll try to do something joint with Apple. And they're like, no, you can't you put your software because we don't require any kind of mobile threat stuff. Like that's not a thing with Apple. And we're like, but it is, right? Like,
Yeah, Pegasus affected Apple devices
yes,
really bad.
yes, it did.
Yeah, so like, but it's very funny because I've been in those conversations where they're like, yeah, that's not a problem with us, and I'm like, no, 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 but it really is. Like, here's, I've just validated this threat. It's a valid concern, and they're like, oh, you can submit it through our bug bounty program, and then I can tell you how many of those with Apple I've gotten back as like oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
every single one of them, they're fully aware of it, they've already fixed it. And I'm like, really? Really? No, that's
It's
awesome.
it's
So,
fun.
I mean, as things evolve, a lot of people are worried about things like AI and stuff. Do you
Mhm.
see any sort of AI in the mobile space that's going to kind of change the game, so to speak, making it easier for attackers or even making it easier to defend, right?
That's it's the same thing for mobile phishing is for email phishing, right? If I can use AI to write a more convincing text message or a more convincing WhatsApp message that you're more likely to click, that's always a bigger threat. Now, at the same time, we can also use that to analyze the text messages so we're not just relying on links or something bad, that we can get a little more intelligence in there. So it'll be a little bit of an AI race in terms of large language models and how we figure out that this one is a threat and this message is just your doctor reminding you about an appointment. Uh,
Right.
because the other thing that's always so damn hard with mobile is it doesn't matter who owns the phone, right? When you're talking about let me talk about your laptop, right? The assumption is if the company provides you a laptop, you shouldn't be doing non-work stuff on there, right? You
Yeah.
Phones aren't like that, right? Whether you provide the phone or the company provides you the phone, for most companies, the expectation is, oh, well, I can put my own stuff on here, right?
Yep.
So now you get into the like, well, we want to monitor text messages. Like we understand privacy and we have restrictions about what we're going to monitor and what we're not, but we're looking for phishing messages. And the users sometimes will just be like, no, because you can't read my text messages. It's like, but we provide you the phone. It doesn't matter. My text messages are my text messages. And a lot of organizations will back off. They'll be like, okay, it's your phone. No, no problem.
Yeah, which
We'll
is
be out.
fascinating because it is a huge threat. It's something I think a lot of organizations don't take seriously. I know to get smishing approved at Disney was pretty hard, because people are like, no, no, it's not really an issue. Finally, um, we were able to do a few smishing simulations and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was one of those challenges where you had to kind of really explain the threat in a lot more detail.
Yeah.
But cool. So, just kind of spinning it back to your
Sure.
career and things of that nature, if you were giving advice to, a young college kid or somebody kind of listening to this, what do you think is the most important skill that you can learn? Not necessarily language or anything like that, but what skill do you think is very important to a career in cyber or even technology?
So I think the thing I tell my kids and I tell anyone who asks me for career advice, you need to be able to talk to people. I don't care what job you have. I don't care if you think you're going to hide in a basement and never interact with a person. That's not true. You'll always have a boss. You'll always have something. You'll have interviews to do, right? So no matter what job you want, no matter what you want in life, you have to be able to interact with other people. You have to be able to tell your story. You have to be comfortable speaking in front of a group, right? And sometimes, so one of the things I definitely found in my career was having that skill gave me a leg up because I'm technical, right? I've always been technical, but I can explain the technology. I can tell you how it works and why it's important. And standing in front of you and going to your office doesn't bother me. And so many of my peers wouldn't do that. They say, well, I know what the technology is, but either I wouldn't talk, or if I get in your office, I'm going to be shouting and ranting and raving because you're not doing it the way I think you should, which of course makes it hard for other people to go that way because you're being a jerk, right?
Yeah.
So I think that more important than any technology, it's dealing with people. And
I I think that is the best advice. I will say because we're both, two executives at large companies that just simply don't fit the executive mold. Like
no,
we're really tech dudes who got into this and we realized that pivotal skill early on, which is none of the other people, because we were the underdogs. We knew we were the underdogs. You didn't have an education for a while, so you knew that was going to be
nope.
a hindrance. So we worked on that one very critical, important skill, soft skills. That is one of the things, like you can code like a crazy person, but if you can't interview, you're not going to be able to talk about how good you are in a way that doesn't sound condescending, that doesn't sound super arrogant. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed someone where I've had to kind of say, hey, let's take a step back. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Right now, you're acting like you're the smartest person in the room. I assure you, you're not. Like, like take a step back. I was
Yeah.
building, mobile apps and doing mobile security before you even knew what mobile was. Like, it's like take a moment to breathe and learn to kind of talk. And I know I work with a lot of great companies who send people to me who have this kind of, they have the technical, but they do not have the soft skills to be able to do that. There's a reason that I'm an executive with a high school education. And it's
Mhm.
because I learned that fundamental skill of talking and really putting myself out there. And as someone who's kind of neurospicy, like it's
Yes,
so
you are.
I am indeed. I am. Yeah, you see me in like real life, not show Rob, so you know exactly
Yes.
how truly weird I am because I
That's true.
I don't mask or pretend to be anything I'm not with you. But like it's so fundamental now more than it has ever been.
Oh
It
yeah.
because it is unfortunately become a very much popularity contest. If you have two people with the exact same skills, the one you enjoyed talking to more is the one who's getting the job, period.
1,000%. That is
Even
exactly how it works.
even if they are less skilled than the other person,
Yep.
you'll go,
That's
you know
how it's going to
what?
be.
I can teach that person technical. I can't teach them not to be a jerk. But
Correct.
absolutely awesome, Andy, dude. I appreciate you coming to hang out. I love doing these at night because it feels really like bow tie after dark. So
Have a good
thanks for coming
time.
to hang out. Of course, I'll see you at D&D on Monday.
You will
For
indeed.
everyone else who's listening, good luck out there.